The primary purpose of Innovative AAC Solutions, the podcast, is to educate and inform. The views expressed during all episodes are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute educational or medical advice. They are not necessarily the views of Special School District of St. Louis County. Hey everybody, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. We are your hosts. I'm Laura Hayes.
And I'm Bridget Solberg.
And we are jumping right into another episode talking about Gestalt language processing and AAC. I am so excited, Bridget, for everyone to hear about our interview today. It's someone who every single time she posts something about her son, I have takeaways and just little things that I think I could apply to some of the AAC users I work with. And so that's Jen Cronk and her son. You may better know her as the blog post N of One. She has a Facebook page as well for N of One. And really, she talks about their journey in such a data-driven way and also in a very applicable way. And so I love that. And I think everyone is going to have a lot of ahas. But one of the things I wanted to highlight is the way, and she has many different posts about this, but she talks about creative communication and how it's not just words and how a gestalt may not just be, or the imagery around what someone thinks of as an experiential gestalt is not just the words they use. It could be manipulating letters, it could be drawing, it could be a video. And so I'm curious if you've seen that with any of your students or heard of any other instances of that.
Well, specifically with Jen, I've watched her YouTube videos and seen how her son does communicate with, media clips. And I've seen that with some of my students who will, go back and rewind, rewatch things. And at first you're like, is this a coincidence? And then you think, no, there's meaning behind it. And we need to be that communication partner that sees the meaning behind that and cues into those things and gives them credit for how they are communicating.
Yeah. And I had a student too that, we talked about the videos and, some of those other examples, but I had a student who used maps, Google Maps specifically to communicate, and he would find exact coordinates. And we're like, well, that's random. He's just playing with the maps. And then only to find out when we honed in on those coordinates, it was a state park. And he had gone to that state park over the weekend with his family. And so that's the detective piece and why it's so crucial. And so these things that we just thought are coincidental are not, whether it be sharing a media clip or rewinding that media clip when something's occurring, or using a whiteboard, using a map, using a photo album to kind of scroll through a memory and share it with a communication partner. Like those all can be forms of creative communication. And Jen and I talk about it, but if you don't already have access to these blog posts that we have been mentioning, it's a really good one to follow because I think she actually talks too about how his language exploded. It actually almost extinguished, I would say, when they used analytic language strategies. And then she discovered March Blanc and they started using and really diving into Gestalt language development and what that could look like for her son. And since then, his language has become just leaps and bounds beyond what it was, and he's moving through the stages in his own way. So, without further ado, let's dive into that interview with Jen Cronk. Hey everyone, welcome back to Innovative AAC Solutions. I'm so excited to introduce our interviewee today. This is Jennifer Cronk. I can't even believe I have the pleasure of introducing her to everyone. She is, I will just say, one of my main inspirations on my partial journey with the idea of GLP and AAC. For those of you guys who don't know her, though, I'm gonna let her introduce herself and her son and kind of give you guys a short synopsis, right, Jennifer? Because we talked about this. This has been a long journey for you both, and it continues to be a journey. So, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about what that has looked like for you guys?
Okay, so I'm Jennifer. I am N's mom, and I'll just refer to him as N. And so I'm his mom, but professionally, I am a teacher. And so I have a background in child development and early childhood special education. So I just have had a long public school teaching career before I had him, and then a decade after he was born. And so I have all those experiences. So as far as his language journey, he's very young, was labeling and saying single words when he was really young, like a year old. And he loved labeling things in books, and a lot of toddler books just have pictures, one picture on the page, so it might be a picture of a cat or a dog or just anything. And he loved labeling way back then. But I did notice as time was going on, he wasn't really like putting single words together back then. But he was saying phrases. And at that time, I didn't know about gestalt language development, and I knew about echolalia. But his language was interesting, and he just had a lot of single words that he just used as single words, and then he had a lot of phrases from songs, in particular from books. He loved to read at that time, and he had a lot of phrases that he heard us say. So, like if he was drinking water, he would say, "Whew, he was thirsty." So he was doing that all the way up until about 3, and then he was diagnosed autistic around at 3, and we noticed his after the age of 3 that his speech became less and less, and that especially after 3.5, his speech became a little more distorted. And so he was speaking less, but still using some echolalia and still using single words as a single word only. So it was around the age of 4 that I was kind of like, I think we need to bring in some AAC, something. And I tried like pictures, like Velcro pictures, but that didn't seem to, resonate with him. Didn't seem like it was meaningful to him. But it took a while because of some misinformation I was given for me to find someone to help me get him some AAC. And so it wasn't until he was 5.5, that I finally found a speech therapist that actually specialized in AAC, because I didn't know that not all speech therapists have extensive training in AAC. And so we had been doing the traditional speech therapy route that whole time, from basically 20 months, because he'd had some feeding issues when he was little. And so we ended up in speech therapy. And that's when they even noticed, hey, his receptive language is not nearly as high as it's expressive. So we had a lot of expressive language, but had difficulties following directions and that kind of thing. So we started with the AAC, and I think one of your questions was why was Touchchat Wordpower chosen? And I think that was what that office was most familiar with. And it was kind of, I think of that philosophy was just like you give a child a system and you teach them that system. That's just one of the philosophies of AAC out there. So he didn't trial any other systems. And so we just jumped in with Touchchat, and we did, for the first 2 years, we just did a lot of modeling. And he went to AAC speech therapy every week. But I noticed after 2 years, during that time, his speech was continuing to decrease. So his echolalic speech had decreased significantly. We still sometimes heard phrases here and there. We're like, oh, it's like, that's so interesting. He says these phrases, but he's not doing that on the AAC. and his speech tended to be not very clear. So it was kind of like, oh, if he could only just make these phrases on the AAC, it would be so much easier for him to get his point across. And so at 2 years, we tried kind of customizing the AAC a little bit more. So we tried to use more activity-based pages and things like that.
Did
so
he
that he didn't have
start,
to
what
navigate.
what layout did he start on, Jennifer? Sorry to
He
interrupt you.
started out with the 60
Okay,
60
okay.
button.
Yep.
We did that for a while.
Okay.
And then that at the 2 years, we switched to the Touchchat 108, which we were able to customize that a little bit more, and put white space around the buttons so that it was less visually overwhelming, to see if that would help. And also we made activity pages basically where there's core words and they was in the same locations as the home page, plus some fringe vocabulary related to favorite activities. So we tried that to see if that would help him be able to connect words together, so you didn't have to navigate to the home page and then do a fringe page and then back to another page. And so we did that for 2 more years. And by that time, he had 4 years of AA speech therapy and really just wasn't really progressing with it. And he was starting to push it away, didn't want it anymore. But ever so often we would hear like this phrase, but we would recognize it, or he could sing a lyric of a song, just a lyric of a song. And it was like, what is this? Why is it that he's not able to pick up on these single words and recombine them, but he can say these phrases? And that was about December 2019. I just started researching. It was just looking to see, okay, I know this is echolalia, but how do you help a child with echolalia understand how single words work? And that's when I fell into the work of Marge Blanc, her clinical work, and read all of her articles free online, completely free, and just read as much as I could that was posted online that she had online. And it was like, oh, he needs the chunks. He needs those long chunks. And then it was kind of like, so I started like modeling just verbally the longer chunks. And then, boy, he just lit up. And it was like, oh, he was so excited. And then I realized just a few months down the line, I'm like, okay, this seems to be resonating with him. But he may not be able to repeat these language chunks reliably. Like he wouldn't be able to just pull it out. And so I was like, okay, let's see if we can figure out how to get some language chunks that I know he loves onto his AAC. And he also liked video clips, just home video clips of favorite activities and favorite places we've been. And they're only like 15 seconds long. So it might be a 15-second clip of him throwing some water balloons, and he loved looking at those. And then I would model gestalts around those video clip experiences. And so I did just try putting just the gestalt on one button, and it just, if you pushed it, it would play the computer voice. And I modeled that for a little while, and he was kind of like, but it was the computer voice. And I didn't realize it till later, probably a year later or more longer, maybe. It's like, okay, I'm modeling these gestalts on the AAC. And then I think I also did, because he was mitigating verbally here and there. And so, they say in the GLP world, try to get an hour language sample. But if you did that with him, it'd probably be 0. He's just verbally saying things maybe a few times a day, sometimes more, sometimes less. So it's just, his speech is just not accessible for him because of his apraxia of speech. And so I think we had been modeling the gestalts verbally and modeling the chunks that I had put on the AAC, but he just, he wasn't able to like the gestalt look up high. I had put that look up high. And so I put that on into his system, the Touchchat system. But then I tried to make a button that said like, look. And then he also said, look at that. So I was trying to break it up so he could mitigate, look up high, look at that, we can kind of mix and match a little bit. And he wasn't like mixing and matching on the AAC, but ever so often he verbally, I'm like, oh, he just mitigated, like, instead of, he said, look up there or something like that, and I was like, oh, instead of look up high, he said, look up there, so he's mitigating this verbally. It's just he's not able to access that 100% of the time. And so I think it was a couple years later. It's been so long that I talked to his AAC's SLP, and we hadn't been doing therapy because we had stopped because of the pandemic and different things in teletherapy. It just wasn't working very well for him. So we went ahead and just paused the direct therapy and just went to like a consultative model. And so we just set an appointment to talk with her. And then she had mentioned the visual scenes and was like, what do you think about putting pictures of like routines and daily things that he does and daily things that he enjoys, and then putting the gestalts around the activity? And it was like, oh, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. And so after that appointment, I just took off and ran with it. And then we started playing with it. And that's when I realized, oh, he prefers the gestalts to be in a human voice or whatever voice the original source was from. So if he heard something from Super Simple Songs, that needs to be recorded from Super Simple Songs, because the computer voice was not cutting it. He needed that intonation and that melody to help him process that language. And so I think it was just a few months of using the visual scenes in routine. So we had like a page for like when we took a shower, a page for bedtime, a page for like TV time, a page for like going outside and working in the yard time. And so we were using that pretty consistently, and I was modeling, and he was playing with it a lot. So he himself, he was just going in and he would find the similarities. So like on the bedtime page, it might say, let's go upstairs because it's time for bed. And then, but on the yard page, it would say, let's go outside. And so he would go to the button, let's go upstairs. And then he'd go to the yard page and find the, let's go outside. So he was like playing and looking at, and he was just kind of seeing the differences and, the visual of seeing those gestalts and hearing it in usually mine or his dad's voice.
You could see those connections happening in live time versus what you had seen before, where you're like, these connections aren't being made. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah. Right. And just an excitement and him using the AAC device more, with the visual scenes versus me just putting the gestalts on a button on like the animals page or whatever. So if the gestalt was related to animals, I would just put it on a button on the animals page or, the farm animals page or whatever. And he wasn't really like accessing those. And that's when I was like, But anyways, a few months after the visual scenes that those were made for him, he did his first single word. So let's go upstairs was on the bedtime page. And one night before bed, we were just kind of hanging out and just having some quiet time. And he was kind of standing in front of us, facing away from us. And then all of a sudden he's like, upstairs, And then I looked at his dad and I was like, did he just say upstairs? And then his dad was like, I think he did. He said it again. He was like, upstairs. And so it was the first time where he had actually pulled a single word off of a gestalt and used it. And so that's when we knew he was in stage 3 of gestalt language. And so it was pretty amazing. It was like,
Yeah, we call that the magical stage, right? It's just like this magic box. Like,
so then we just started playing. So we just started playing with, after that, playing with the stage 3 type language models, and not all the time, just like when it felt right. And, it might be just in a moment if we're playing with doing a certain activity, I might model some, single words together. But yeah, he was at stage 3 for 4 months. And that because it was like the spring, and then this summer it was clear that he was emerging into stage 4 because he doesn't point, he pointed. So he kind of, pointed at that point in the summer, and we were using language together, single words together, combining single words, and he pointed up to the sky because we were outside. And so it was at that point that it was like we realized, oh, he's emerged into stage 4. And so that's where he's been, as far as we know, so for almost 2 years now. It's been in stage 4. And we've continued to kind of play with, like, okay, how is stage 4, 3, and 4 going to work with AAC, the traditional AAC system for him? And we've played with a few things. He's still, and I've talked about this online, he's still very much those stage 2, kind of analyzed gestalt. So he's not using like language chunks that are unanalyzed, if that makes sense. So he would sometimes say, hurts mama's ears. And that was something I said when we were together playing with the music app. And whenever he said, hurts mama's ears, that meant that he wanted me to sit with him and play with him, just kind of interact with him. But those words, hurts mama's ears, that doesn't mean, the meaning of those words doesn't mean I want to hang out with you, Bob. Yeah. And so it was just a piece of language, a chunk of language he heard while we were together having a good time. And because it was said with intonation and emotion, he just picked that right up. So that piece of language was just kind of attached to that. Oh, I hang out with mom. That's that chunk of language for when I hang out with mom. But he doesn't do that anymore. So he doesn't use like hurts mama's ears in reference to hanging out with me. Kind of thing. And in fact, he would use hurts mama's ears to refer to hurt, like his ears hurt. So he might cover his ears and say hurts mama's ears because he's realizing the word hurt means something is hurting. So it's pretty cool. So we've just seen lots and lots of just like little communication connections and language connections, but still those language chunks are still very, very salient in his life. It's not like he was in stages 1 and 2 and that went away and now he only uses single words. So he still predominantly uses the language chunks. But we hear ever so often, I'll hear like a couple words and I was like, oh, he pulled that word from this gestalt, that word from this gestalt, or he pulled 2 words out of a longer gestalt and put those together. It's like you kind of see him just making those connections.
I love that. I love how you've described that. One of the things I wanted to unpack with you a little bit is the fact that sometimes what I hear people say is, well, this is all about just doing good AAC. But you guys did what we would consider good AAC for a very long time. I don't remember the exact quantity. You have some amazing videos that talk about your journey and more in depth. So if, with your permission, we can always put those in the show notes. And so I don't want to unpack that part of it, but I want you to kind of, for the listeners, just kind of go into, you did good AAC. So it's not necessarily about getting the right system or making sure you're modeling enough, right? For N, it did make a difference. Like this, you had to look at this differently because he was not using, like you mentioned, the synthesized speech of the device. Right? It wasn't connecting for him. It wasn't connecting using a single word icon by itself, right? The visual scenes helped with that. You've mentioned in some of the videos or some of your YouTube videos about how videos at certain points made a difference for him. So can you just maybe kind of expand on that for someone who said, well, really, this is just about modeling and doing good AAC?
Okay. Well, our AAC SOP is like a giant in the field. I'm not going to name, but I mean, this is a person that's an expert, has tons and tons and tons of just experience and training and education, and shared so many different resources with me, just generous, just absolutely generous with the information, and gave me all the right tools. Like we never did hand over hand. it was just a wonderful experience. But, you know, there was a missing piece, you know, in terms of like his brain processes language in chunks, not in single words. And so like traditional AAC, you know, you can model, you know, go park or give that, you know, but that he would just memorize get that and see that as one. So you could say get cookie, but then he might say get cookie for anything ever getting, you know. And so his brain needs those language chunks. And then after he has, you know, has enough of those language chunks, then you could break the chunks apart and kind of mix and match, or, you know, just different things. And so yeah, I think that's what I would just tell people is like, if your brain doesn't process single words, and how are they supposed to use AAC when they're single words, you know? And they're also words, and even today, this is kind of an issue where all of his language is woven already, and all these language chunks that he has built up over the, you know, he's a teenager now, you know, the words are organized in those gestalts and in these experiences, you know. And so for him to have to think, oh, this word is in this category, I got to go find that word, and this word is in this category, I got to go find that word, it's really difficult for him. So even today, it's best to have kind of those language chunks, and we to model like language chunks, and to have the video clips there. And he's really good at, you know, we could be talking about weather and he'll pull up something about the weather, a video about the weather, you know, and for things. And so, yeah, it's like we tried. 4 years is a long time to model extensively, and not see
And then when you
progress.
made the switch, it was within months, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it was I mean, like it
Yes.
was almost immediate. And like one of the things I
Yes.
hear you mention is just about the natural connections being made, right? He's doing some self-learning within that journey versus this explicit taught opportunities that aren't
Yeah.
carrying over and generating.
Yes. Yes.
What would you say to maybe a family or a therapist who is trying to support someone along the journey of like exploring AAC for someone who is a creative communicator, or someone who is learning through chunks? What would you say, or what would you say like to avoid? What would be some pitfalls that you've learned along this path to avoid?
Probably not wait too long for some kind of progress. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be, oh, they're connecting single words. It could be like, are they attending to the models, or are they just kind of like, you know, they're not really drawn to the AAC. That was the biggest thing. And the only reason that we waited so long is just we weren't aware of that information. It wasn't like out there. It's out there now. And so there's a lot more information. A lot of people are talking about it. And the autistic adult community is, you know, the adult GLPs are also talking about it and kind of, you know, sharing their stories. And so it's more, yeah. And I think too is like with someone who's starting out and they know their child's a GLP because maybe they're not speaking echolalia or gestalts, but they're playing, you know, certain video clips on YouTube over and over again, or every time, you know, a certain line in a movie plays, you go run up and look at the screen, or something, you know, and you know, oh wow, that particular piece of language means something to that person, you know, to that child or person. I would still like offer traditional AAC, model it, kind of see how it goes. Just don't wait too long if you're noticing they're just not gelling with it. It's not, you know, they don't seem interested. You should see some interest. So within, he showed interest, great interest in the beginning. But I think it just became like a source of confusion over time. It was just like, I'm not getting this. This is like too confusing for me. And he needed those language chunks for it to process, and then later break those up and break it down to single words. And that kind of thing. So I would try traditional, because I know a lot of parents of GLPs, they try it, and the children are able to actually navigate, and they could go find let's and then go and then or look and then up and then high. They can, they can find that. I think everybody's just different.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not even need gestalts programmed in. So you just kind of have to jump in, but monitor progress for sure.
I think that's such good advice, right? And just like look at a bit, like you mentioned this earlier, but how can they flexibly use the system, right? Versus just memorizing a motor pattern and then over generalizing that to everything. That's one of my big things we look at is have they over generalized it and they say want cookie for everything? That probably means that they've got the motor plan down, but they're not breaking and processing the words as single units by themselves. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Um, okay. Before we jump into our last question, I did want to briefly ask you, because you guys have started some seeing some literacy things
Yeah.
too. Can we give the listeners a few examples of what that's looked like for N and just how you guys have creatively done that on your journey too?
So okay. So the literacy piece. So I have noticed, and I already kind of made a little point about it, that the traditional AAC system, even though he's, post stage 4, he's emerged into stage 4, that going in and finding those single words when all his language is, wrapped up in these, language chunks, is difficult for him. Now, other people, it may not be, but it's important to recognize individual differences among AAC users who are GLP also. So I realized very quickly we're going to have to really kind of jump in on the literacy, because then if he could, take those chunks of language that he knows in his mind and transcribe that to print, that's going to make his life a lot easier. So if he knows in his mind what word he wants to say, if he can write it, then he doesn't have to worry about trying to go find these words in categories that were made by a stranger, And so prior to stage 4, this is not something that applies to everyone. Prior to stage 4, he's hyperlexic. He always has been. So he can read, so he can decode very well. So I can lay out words like cat, dog, mom, dad, those, simple words, and say, show me cat, show me mom, show me dad. And occasionally, especially when he was younger, preschool age, he would point to words and say them. So he's always been able to read, to decode. But that for him, that did not translate to being able to write or spell. So he has difficulties, basically like dysgraphia, difficulties with like writing and drawing pictures and that kind of thing. That's not something that's ever come easily for him. And then with like typing, he's had, and letter manipulatives, he's had many, many opportunities to like create words. And so him being able to decode has not translated to being able to spell or write. And so we just kind of had jumped into more comprehensive literacy. And so I like to use components from comprehensive literacy for all, especially the emergent writing, where it's kind of like them, just like whatever alternative pencil, like keyboard, a letter labeler. Those are his favorites. Some other people like letter tiles or letter manipulatives, and just letting them play, create, scribble with those alternative pencils, and then attributing meaning. Oh, look, you made a letter M. Maybe that could be for mom, or something like that. Just kind of. So we've been doing that for a long time, but I think the phonics part of things for him didn't come together until after stage 4. Now, some other kids, that may not be the case, especially if they're autistic. We have that uneven development. So some kids are hyperlexic, they can read and decode, and they can spell and write. It's no problem. But for him, it was kind of like, okay, I see, he needs some support with spelling and writing. And so we had tried phonics prior to him emerging into stage 4. He was is he almost 11 at that point? So we jumped into the phonics, and then it just all like started clicking. So I can ask him, what's the first sound in the word cat or cat, and then give him some choices like C, W, uh, P or whatever, and he could choose it where he couldn't before. So he was like recognizing the smaller parts of words. So like he went from like language chunks and then mixing and matching those language chunks to like, ooh, single word, and then the literacy piece of finding those phonemes in those single words. And so that's what we've been doing for the past 2 years, and he's really starting to you can see those connections, like with words that he loves. Like he just has the word warm, like a warm blanket has just special meaning, and he loves saying warm. And recently he's taken a dry erase marker and wrote WM. So he's recognizing the letters and creating words, just beginning to, get those letters sound and putting them together, and just really exploring that. So it's been really, really cool.
I love that for you guys. I wanna, if anybody is, wondering about more of the comprehensive literacy for all, or if they're wondering about some of the things you talked about in that beautiful explanation, I would encourage them to go back. Last season, we did an entire season on literacy. So every single episode kind of goes into some of the things that you talked about in way more detail. So I encourage anybody that's listening to go back to those episodes because those go into more detail, because we could unpack that in its own episode. But I think that just that idea that now he's flexibly using not just words, but he's flexibly starting to use phonemes and kind of building his own, which is what we want, building his own autonomous thoughts about his world and what he's experiencing. And that's what we want to get to. That's why we need access to the alphabet. That's why we need literacy and writing and all of those good things. Um, is there anything else that you wish parents and therapists could know about GLP communicators like Ed?
Oh, they're all different. They're all different. And that uh, one that, the use of language chunks, it's not something we want to get rid of. It's not something that we want to leave it behind, because we want to only focus on single words. That language chunks may remain. And for some people, it's more noticeable. Like with N, and other people, it may not be noticeable. You may think, oh, they're using single word generations. And many autistic adults are saying, I'm not. I'm using grammatically correct, language chunks, and I plug it in when I need to plug in. And so that, and then also that you have to look at the GLP right in front of you.
Mm.
So don't read stuff about it and they go, oh, that's gonna be the way my child develops. Everybody's developmental journey is just different. And that whatever their language chunks that a person has is going to vary from person to person. So we can't just take generic language chunks and teach them. That's not really what Gestalt language is about. It's about like they pick up these language chunks that are, usually attached to an experience. And then they collect a whole bunch of those. And then they start kind of mixing and matching and start plugging in different words into those language chunks that they acquired. And so it's not about pushing a certain bank of language chunks on a child and hoping that they'll use those to communicate. So I think that's probably the biggest points I would drive home.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Yep. I think that is key. And I think that just like tapping in and finding those connection points so that they can have those meaningful experiences is just such a nice take-home message for everyone. So one more question before I let you go, because I ask everyone that comes on, what is your favorite, if you can pick one? I would say if there's a couple, that's fine too. But if there's a favorite AAC moment that you've had with N, or just along your own journey of this entire experience, what would that be? Do you have a favorite? Can you share?
I love it when he uses his videos, the little video clips. Like those are my like favorite because it's like, wow, it's just so clever. He's just so clever. I think the most recent, and I think I kind of commented on it, talking about just on online, social media, talked about it. But he was with his OT one day, and we were just there. We were talking, and we had done at home. We had done a rocket balloon activity where it's like a pump and you blow up these rocket balloons. And we were, talking. I was telling his, OT that we had tried that. I said, we were telling, and I was telling her, and was listening with his, AAC device, and he was sitting in the suite with his AAC device, and I was saying, it's the craziest thing is, all the pink balloons in the kit popped. I said, but those are the only ones that popped. Isn't that weird? And then his OT commented, oh, that happened one time at my grandchild's birthday party where all the helium balloons that we got, they all popped before the party started. And we all had to, we had to run out and get some more balloons for the party. And then like a second later, and pulls up this video clip of our friends that had sent him a happy birthday song. And so they sang him happy birthday. And at the end of the song, they had a balloon and they poked it with a pin. It was kind of like their tradition. They'd say happy birthday to you and they're woo. And then they would pop the balloon as like a celebration. It's just like less than 30-second clip. And I put it on his device because he loved it because it was sent to me through the phone. And so he, pulls up this, video of the birthday song and the balloon being popped. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's like a wordless communication right there. He does that a lot.
Yeah.
Like we'll be talking about stuff and he'll just pull up these videos. And then he has played them for his OT and just for like doctors and different things to like show them things that he's interested in. And everybody is just really amazed at how he just uses these video clips to communicate things that he's thinking about, places he's been, things he cares about. Mm-hmm. So that's probably my favorite.
I love that about him too, and just the nuanceness of sharing something that can't be contained in a single icon or a picture, right? It means so much more that this, in some capacity, like an episode is playing out in his head that reminds him of something else as an episode, and it's not coincidental. It is applicable to exactly the context that you're talking about, and there's no denying it, and that happens more often. He's not the only one. I've had it happen with many people that I support. And so I love that you shared that example because I think it's so pertinent and it's something someone might write off as they're just playing a video or they're just sitting on their device. Yep. They're not using it meaningfully. We want to keep them locked into this device. They don't need access to any videos. They don't need access to any other interactive media supports. But really, like you said, Jennifer, it's individualized. We really have to get the crux of what do they need. It's not about us. It's not about gatekeeping or putting anything specific or having a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about looking at the individual, finding connection points, finding what means something to them, and then going from there.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's just land the plane there because that is, just giving me all the feels. If a parent or a therapist has a question, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
I do have a Facebook page. It's called And of One. And so you can go check that out. And you can make a comment there or whatever. That's probably the easiest.
Perfect. We will put that in the show notes. And I just want to thank you again for coming on today. I know that this is going to hit home with many people, and I just hope that everyone kind of can resonate with it and just continue on their own journey. So on behalf of Innovative AAC Solutions, we just want to thank Jennifer for coming on today and sharing all that she has learned and just your experiences with Ed. I personally just have learned and valued it so much.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, it's Bridget here with another fun activity. Today I'm going to show you STEM Explorers Domino Action. And what I like about this game is that it can be used for a variety of different students. Age, I don't think would be a limit with this one. And you would set it up like this with dominoes. And then you use a marble to knock them down. So when you are doing that, some stage one gestalts could be like, let's build more. I can find the domino. It goes here. I see it. I found it. I'll get it. Let's put it here. Will it work? I see the ball. This is fun. Let's knock it down. For stage two gestalts, you could be like, it's a cup. It's a domino. Do you like the big ball? I'll build it. Let's build more dominoes. Will it go? Where's the, and then whatever item. Look at it go. Knock it down. This is the stairs. Then stage three would be, again, those descriptors plus nouns. So like little marble, big steps, little domino, big domino, purple cup. I think this would be really fun for a variety of ages. And I think that this would really be a great way to get those kids using hands-on and getting them to really enjoy their AAC and language activity.